Hi friends, this is Adam Shoemaker, rector here at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in downtown Charleston, welcoming you back for another edition of our Faith and Film series that I enjoy doing over the summer months. And today I'll be reflecting on the 1981 film Chariots of Fire, one of my favorites and an appropriate one to reflect on as the Tokyo Olympics is underway. And this film is a film focused on real life characters. The primary characters are two runners who win gold medals for the United Kingdom in the 1924 Olympics in Paris, France, Harold Abrahams and Eric Liddell. I fell in love with this film when I ran track at my Roman Catholic high school in Long Island, New York. Not only because it's a film that focuses on running, but also because I do believe there is a lot to chew on here in regards to the life of faith. And as an aside, a little trivia for you, Chariots of Fire is one of only two sports movies to ever win the Academy Award for Best Picture. The other film is Rocky that came out in 1976. I had to look this one up. The title for this film, Chariots of Fire, was inspired by a line, "Bring me my chariots of fire," from a William Blake poem adapted into the wonderful hymn, Jerusalem, that is heard at the end of the film. Again, the movie centers on two real-life figures, Harold Abrahams, a young man who runs with a chip on his shoulder because of the anti-Semitism that he has experienced as a Jewish person, and Eric Liddell, a young Scottish missionary who sees his running as a part of his evangelistic vocation and as a way to glorify God. These two runners are rivals throughout the film, but by the end of the film end up running on the same team and winning medals in different events. The story of Eric Liddell in particular is quite notable from a faith perspective because his story touches on issues of vocation, stewardship, and also what it means to really put one's faith at the very center of all one says and does. And these issues come to the fore in some difficult decisions that Eric has to make during the film. The first of which is whether or not to compete in the Olympics at all. Again, Eric was a missionary. He came from a missionary family. He was born to missionaries in China, and he ultimately dies as a missionary in China, and I'll get to that piece of his story in just a little bit. But he was fast, he was gifted with great speed, and a close friend tries to convince him to go for the Olympics. But his sister Jenny is worried that his commitment to running, to sport, will be a distraction from his primary mission to God. But after prayerful reflection, Eric decides to go for the Olympics, not only because, as one of his siblings puts it, the world needs a muscular Christian. By running, he can bring his Christian faith to the world stage, but also because he clearly sees his running as an important part of his stewardship. We are called as Christians to steward all the resources that God has given us, material and otherwise, and God clearly had made Eric fast. And so, as Eric says in the film, when he runs, he feels God's pleasure. And this points to a classic definition for vocation, penned by the author and theologian Frederick Buechner, who once wrote that your vocation, your calling in life, is the place where your deep gladness or your deep joy meets the world's deep hunger. And there is no doubt when you watch this film that when Eric Liddell runs, he feels joy. When he runs, he seems to almost be in an ecstatic state, having a moment of spiritual communion with God. But where, you might ask, is the world's deep need here? Well, you have to remember that this is all taking place in the 1920s in Europe, just after World War I. And so the world is still sort of putting the pieces back together at this point. And so I believe that Eric's running is a gift in that regard, to help people to push forward with their life. And as an aside, I think the same could be said for the Tokyo Olympics. And I know there's a lot of controversy around the Olympics, and that there certainly are risks, and there have already been breakthrough cases of fully vaccinated people testing positive. But that said, I do believe there are gifts that this game offers the world as well. I remember watching a portion of the opening ceremonies of the games last week, and I got emotional seeing the Olympic flame lit, the same flame that was lit at the 1924 Olympics in Paris when Harold Abrahams and Eric Liddell competed. It was a reminder to me that despite all of our challenges and all of our travails in light of this ongoing pandemic, that life does continue in many respects, and that there is still reason to smile, reason to find joy, a reason to celebrate. The second decision that I want to speak about that Eric Liddell has to make, a difficult decision, relates to his decision, and this really does happen, to pull out of the 100-meter dash where he was originally scheduled to compete against Harold Abrahams, who ends up winning the gold medal in that event. Eric Liddell pulls out of the 100-meter dash when he learns on his way to Paris that the heats for the dash will be on Sunday. And he believes deeply that the Sabbath day is the Lord's day, and therefore not a day to compete. And so he risks not competing in the Olympics at all after years and years of hard work and discipline and practice. But he does this because to compete on the Sabbath for him would be a betrayal of all his values, and even why he was choosing to run in the first place, to glorify God. The head of the British Olympic Committee, even members of the royal family try to convince him otherwise, but he is unmoved because of his faith, which I can imagine must have been a very, very difficult decision for him. But fortunately, another British runner gets wind of this and comes forward and offers to step aside and allow Eric to take his place in the 400-meter dash. Eric accepts and wins that race, and he does not just win it. I looked this up too. Eric Liddell wins the gold medal in 1924, and in so doing sets the world record in the process. It really is a pleasure to watch this film unfold. And stepping back, I believe the film is a visual reminder of just why the Bible borrows so often from athletic imagery to talk about the life of faith. Like in this verse from Isaiah that Eric Liddell quotes from in a sermon during the film. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. This film is a reminder that the effort that Harold Abrahams and Eric Liddell put into their running, that takes their whole beings, is a reminder to me that the life of faith takes effort, takes perseverance, takes discipline. The word disciple is related to the word discipline, and we do need to work at it. We need to say our prayers. We need to participate actively in a faith community. We need to intentionally and thoughtfully consider how best to steward all the many gifts that God bestows upon us. And I would also add that as a lifelong runner, I would say that running for me has also felt always like a very prayerful experience, because when I run, it quiets my mind down, it opens my heart, it allows me to center on my breathing and my body and the gift of the present moment that God has given us, which really, when you really get down to it, is the only thing that we have in this world, the present moment. And prayer helps us stay attuned to that. And in any project, any athletic project, be it running or even walking, getting outside, moving our body, I would say is a really helpful spiritual practice, and something that I found especially helpful during lockdown at the height of this COVID-19 pandemic. I did promise that I would conclude by saying a little bit about what happens to Harold Abrahams and Eric Liddell as their life goes on. Harold Abrahams ends up being a grand old man of British athletics, lives a long life, lives till almost 80 and dies in the late 1970s. And the film Chariots of Fire opens and closes at his funeral. That's where we hear the wonderful hymn Jerusalem that is often a hymn or occasionally a hymn that we might hear at church at St. Stephen's. But Eric Liddell, after winning the gold and setting the world record at the Olympics, goes back to his missionary work and goes back to China. And during World War II, he is sent to an internment camp. And I did a little research and learned that Eric was a very selfless individual in that camp, always putting the needs of others before his own. I also learned something that was not revealed until decades later, but Eric Liddell actually, because of his notoriety, was given a chance to be released early from that camp, to get out. Would have saved his life, would have allowed him to rejoin his family who had fled China years earlier. But Eric Liddell didn't do that. He allowed another person in that camp, a pregnant woman, to go in his stead. And eventually he is infected by a brain tumor and dies just at the very end of World War II, very, very sadly. But his legacy clearly lives on in this wonderful film, Chariots of Fire. If you haven't seen it, please do. The score is absolutely beautiful, and the primary song of this film I think has become very familiar. I always found it an inspiring one to run to. When you hear it, I'm sure you will recognize it. So I hope you see it, or perhaps even re-watch it after hearing these thoughts, because it really is such a pleasure to see. I'll be back next month in August with another film to reflect on. In the meantime, friends, be safe and well, and I'll see you at the movies.